Oh, Brandon, unfortunately, we're going to have an early start on the summer and be able to focus even more on TVs and movies. And I'm going to come to you with a recommendation because I had been picking up season 2 of Beef. Have you seen the show?
I watched episode 1 of season 1 when it first came out, and it's one of those shows I liked it, and I just forgot to go back to it.
Well, I'm going to recommend that you watch season 1 and then pick up season 2 once you complete that one. It's a great show. It's almost like an anthology type show, where not anthology, but it's a show like The White Lotus. Every season's different cast, and so the cast of season 2 is completely different than the cast of season 1. The scenario, the setups, everything is different, but the dynamics of this beef between various characters persists between both season 1 and season 2. It's just an excellent show. I would actually say it's like also uncomfortable to watch, but so uncomfortable you want to keep watching and see what happens next.
Well, unfortunately, I have a lot more free time on my hands for the next 3 months, and I am looking for some shows to watch, so I will put it back on my list. I didn't realize like the anthology aspect of it. I did see that season 2 is a different cast, so I wondered if that was the direction they were going. As long as Jennifer Coolidge is in every season, like White Lotus, I'm in.
Well, there's no Jennifer Coolidge, but there is plenty of to worth there's plenty to watch in this show. It's definitely high on my list of recommendations. And, as a Korean myself, Korean culture is a part of both seasons. So at least that aspect is worth watching. I know you love Koreans because you love me.
I do. I do. I am in. You buried the lead. I will be watching.
Welcome back to the Daily Thunder podcast. I'm John Napier, publisher of Daily Thunder, and I'll be your host today. Alongside me is Daily Thunder beat writer Brandon Rahbar. Brandon, how are you today?
I am well, but I am bummed. I am bummed for Thunder fans, this Thunder team. This organization was so incredibly close to reaching back-to-back NBA finals, and I just can't help but think had J-Dub and AJ Mitchell been healthy for this series, that right now we would be previewing game 1 of Thunder versus Knicks. It didn't happen, and you got to tip your hat to the Spurs, but can't help but think things might be different had injuries gone a little bit differently for the Thunder.
And that's where we'll start. We'll talk about the series against the Spurs, and in particular, Game 7. We'll also hand out some grades at a high level for the team. I'm going to have you give out grades for the Thunder's offense, its defense, and the team overall this season. We'll get into player grades later in another podcast. And then for some fun, or at least the opportunity to push back on some of the narratives that have been going around after this Game 7, we're going to do a blind take rankings of some of the hottest overreactions to the Thunder loss in Game 7 to wrap us up. And maybe we'll get your predictions on the finals, but I don't know if you are like me. It's going to be really tough to watch someone else play in the finals.
Yes, it is, because the Thunder, I felt, were the best team this season, honestly. I do think that the Thunder and the Spurs were the two best teams, but I think at full strength, the Thunder are still the best team. So it's hard to watch a finals in which you cover a team and you feel like that team was the best in the league and they're not there. So yeah, and honestly, I'm rooting for the Knicks, but that's a whole other subject.
Well, maybe we'll have time for that. But to start with, Game 7, I think going into the game, you could throw out the script, right? Because it's a Game 7. The Spurs won big in Game 6, while that probably gave them a confidence boost going into that decisive Game 7. Thunder were at home. You knew the Thunder were going to come to play. And in my heart of hearts, I knew that SGA would put together his best game of the series with the season on line. And that's exactly what he did. But the Thunder came up short. The Spurs jumped out to an early lead. And while the Spurs never fully took control, they did expand their lead to double digits a few times throughout the game. The Thunder were always right there. They even had a 4-point lead in the second quarter, and things looked like they were hyped up, and the Thunder might just take control of this game. Ultimately, the Spurs won a close one. Brandon, how did the Thunder lose game 7?
Okay, with the caveat that they didn't have J-Dub and AJ Mitchell, and I think that's the biggest factor. Besides that, the game itself with the players that were there, as you said, SGA was brilliant. He was the best player on the court. He was the MVP. He did everything he could against an elite defense that was completely tilted and shaded his way this entire series. He blasted them. He was brilliant. They honestly lost this game because of a few different Spurs runs, I thought. I thought when the Thunder took that lead to close the first half, they got up by 4. They had the crowd going crazy. They had all the momentum. And then the Spurs went on a 7-0 run in like the last minute to take the lead back and take the momentum back. You know, even though you had to feel good that the Thunder were only down 3 points going into the half, considering how things looked in the beginning of the game, they still stole some of that momentum. And then there was a stretch, I believe in the third quarter, where Julian Champagny, of all players, and I know he's a good shooter, but he hasn't had an impact on this entire series. He hit 2 threes, and Lou Dort fouled him on a 3. And so he went on a personal, like he scored 8 points, and the Spurs went on a 10-2 run. I thought that stretch, and then the beginning of the fourth quarter, when the Spurs just hit 3 after 3 after 3, they caught fire. You hate to say shooting variance. You hate to say, oh, that team just got hot. But it was one of those deals where the Spurs couldn't miss. They got some offensive rebounds, and the Thunder couldn't hit. And I think those 3 stretches are what I look to as what decided the game ultimately. And then if you get into it, like Alex Caruso was incredible this series, incredible. But he unfortunately came back down to earth in game 7. And I mean, didn't come back down to earth. He just had a really bad shooting night is what it was. And not enough players outside of SGA and Cason Wallace scored, hit shots, hit open threes. And it was just really unfortunate. It ultimately came down to a game where Shea far outperformed Wemby, and the Thunder role players didn't hit shots, and the Spurs role players did hit shots. And it's a bummer because it was on your home court. And typically that's where, you know, the home role players shoot better and the road role players shoot worse. And that didn't happen. And that basically decided who was going to the NBA Finals.
And the Thunder did this as well. And I'm going to do this because I genuinely mean it. I think you have to give credit to the Spurs. Yes, the Thunder were injured, and I do think that was a difference maker in this game and in the season. I mean, the series ultimately. But one thing that I expected is that the Spurs would have to take their lumps as a young team, and they're going to make some mistakes. And then the pressure might cause them to miss some shots they normally make. But that wasn't the case. They shot 43% from 3. And as you noted in the fourth quarter, they hit big 3 after big 3. When the Thunder cut the lead to 2 in the fourth quarter, what happened? Keldon Johnson came back and hit a 3, gave the Spurs a 5-point lead. And the Thunder really got no closer than that the remainder of the game. And so credit to the Spurs, because even as a young team, they made plays. They hit the shots when they mattered, and the Thunder didn't.
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately what it came down to. They did. You know, and you felt like, you know, all of NBA history says home game 7, experienced championship team versus a road, young, inexperienced team. Things, you know, like outside shooting, big shots, fourth quarter clutch type of game favors the home championship experienced team. And that just wasn't, you do have to tip your hat to the Spurs. I do think the Spurs are an anomaly in the NBA where it's hard to compare them against the rest of NBA history because of their makeup of their team. They have like the biggest, you know, most hyped generational prospect, arguably of all time in Wemby. Then they got the number 4 pick. Then they got the number 2 pick. They had another all-star on their team that's kind of a vet in De'Aaron Fox. They had a 6-man of the year in Keldon Johnson. Like, there's a lot of talent on this team, and it's not just Wemby. They're very, very talented. They've got a lot of top picks in young guys. So I don't think that they're a typical young team because you don't usually see this much top-end blue chip talent consolidated on one team typically. So I do think that they're sort of an outlier where it's hard to compare them to the rest of history. But yeah, you got to tip your hat. They played really, really well.
Yeah, and they are loaded because of the lottery luck that they had, but and then credit to them as well. I mean, I'm just going to keep giving up the Spurs because one, I think they deserve it, and two, it makes me feel a little bit better that we got an almost otherworldly performance from the Spurs. They really had to have everything go in their favor to beat even the injury depleted Thunder because this was a razor thin margin between the teams in this series. But the difference also in Game 7 was Champagny, who was 6 of 10 from three. He scored 20 points. He led everybody in plus minus with a plus 16, and I'm pretty sure he was undrafted.
Yeah, yeah, he was undrafted, and much like Jared McCain and Isaiah Joe, he was cast aside by the Philadelphia 76ers, and the Spurs were able to get him. It is on one end. I think if you're a Thunder fan, you're like, look, this was always going to be difficult without J-Dub and AJ Mitchell. Not only is that your second best player and arguably your fourth best player, it's your second and third best overall offensive players, but it's all your shot creation, playmaking, and ball handling outside of SGA. This was going to be very, very difficult without those two guys. So on one hand, you can say, look, we took the Spurs to the brink of a game seven, the final moments of a game seven without two of our best players. You gave it a great shot. And look, the Thunder are not going anywhere. Despite all the ridiculous stakes that are out there, they're still a championship team that's also incredibly young. That's still going to get better, I believe. And they're especially going to get better if they're healthy next year. But then on the other hand, I think it's hard to accept that ultimately, all other things being equal, you could argue that Julian Champagny was the difference in the Thunder making the NBA Finals or not. And maybe it's tough to reconcile that fact, but sometimes that's what it comes down to. A role player stepping up, and he did in a big way. 20 points on 6 of 10 3-point shooting, and like you said, led everybody in plus minus. And really, he had a really, really good game 5 that ultimately didn't matter, but he shot pretty poorly outside of game 5 and game 7. Actually, he shot very poorly, and was pretty much a negative for the rest of the series. So those were kind of the shots that you wanted them to be taking. And unfortunately, on this night, he was hitting them all.
Well, notably absent from many of your discussions of what happened in Game 7 was Chet Holmgren. And of course, Chet's going to be in some of the overreaction takes that we'll talk about later in the pod. But we can't ignore Chet's game. He played 33 minutes, he scored 4 points, and he took half as many attempts from the field as Kenrich Williams, and Kenrich played 4 minutes. What was going on with Chet? What was your analysis of the way that he played that game?
Yeah, obviously, Chet did not have a good game, especially offensively. I actually thought defensively he was still pretty solid. He had 2 steals, 2 blocks, and I think he still affected things defensively. Should have had more rebounds. I thought one of the big things, there was like a few times where it was kind of like a battle between him and a Spurs player, sometimes like a guard or a wing for a rebound, and they wrestled the rebound away from him. But yeah, offensively, he's just got to be more assertive. Chet typically always just takes like a good shot, like an efficient shot, whether that be an open 3, whether that be something in the mid range, a putback, a lob, those type of things. I do think, I'm not trying to give Chet excuses. I do think this matchup in particular is difficult for a couple of reasons. Look, first of all, Chet is 7-1. He is typically, in every single game of his career, been by far the biggest dude on the court. And I know that, like, as a 7'1" guy with a 7'6" wingspan, you're like, yeah, but he's your best bet against Wemby, and he should still be able to, get what he wants against Wemby. He's still giving up 4 or 5 inches. That's like dudes who are 6'8" trying to score against Chet. It's tough. It's a tough matchup. There's no way around that. It's a tough matchup, and it alters the way he plays. But I think it also alters the way he plays not having J-Dub or AJ Mitchell. Look, as far as like setting him up at the rim for lobs and those kind of things, J-Dub and him have the best chemistry on the team. AJ Mitchell is probably the second best on the team as far as like that connection with Chet. That said, still, put all those things aside, he's got to have more than 2 attempts. And I do think that there were times where he could have taken a shot where he passed it up and kept the ball moving. I don't know if it is a deal where he felt like Shea was cooking, Kaysen was cooking, and he didn't feel like he had it that night, and he wanted to give it up to the MVP and let him cook. I know people said, he looked scared, and I get that because he didn't take those shots and he was apprehensive. But a lot of times it wasn't against Wemby even. It was against guards or wings where he felt like he could have and should have taken the shot. It was a strange thing to not see him take more shots. When you look at the rest of the series, though, ultimately he didn't take a lot of shots. He probably averaged about 8 or so shots per game in this series. Not a good performance. The overreactions are wild to me because he has, and I know that we'll get into this later, but I'll just say quickly, he has been elite. He has been great in every other 8 series in his playoff career. He's been elite every single game of his regular season for the most part. And, he's the second best defensive player in the world this season, and I think going forward. So I still think this is a guy who was the third best player on a championship team as a 23-year-old coming off of a broken hip. So I don't think that one series should define somebody's career like we're seeing with the overreactions, but absolutely no doubt a disappointing series, and especially Game 7 for Chet.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said there. And we've heard Chet take ownership of his performance in Game 7. And he had points in this series where he made an impact. And for some reason in this game, he was very passive. I mean, just candidly, he was very passive in this game. And I think there was a clip on Twitter that I saw, and I can't remember who posted it. It's not someone I agree with, but I agree with the take that, there was a point in the game where Chet gets the ball, Wemby is defending him. This is when Wemby has 5 fouls, and Chet just immediately gives it up. He doesn't even think about trying to put pressure on Wemby and defend him with those 5 fouls. And that passivity from Chet, I think was a disappointment because in this Game 7, the Thunder needed Chet to be the second best player. Whether he could ultimately achieve that, who knows? But I think we needed to see him try, and we really didn't get that from Chet in Game 7. So to me, that was the greatest disappointment.
Yeah, it was disappointing, absolutely, for sure. And I agree. It was just his being passive that really is what stood out. And, that's not typically what we see from Chet. He's typically very aggressive and plays physically. And, you talk about the thin frame and all that, but he doesn't play that way. He typically plays with force, and he didn't this game. And like you said, the Thunder needed more from him, and it was disappointing. I still don't think it's going to define his career, and I'd still think that the overreactions are kind of getting out of control, but absolutely a disappointing Game 7 from Chet.
Well, again, as sad as I am that the Thunder are not playing in the finals, and as difficult as it will be to watch the Spurs play in the finals, when I really feel like the Thunder had the best team. I agree with you. The Thunder was supposedly healthy going into the playoffs. Everything looked like it was set up to make a real run and a chance at a repeat. That's not the way it played out, but still overall, I mean, I would imagine 28 teams wish they could get to the point the Thunder get, or 27 teams wish they get to the point the Thunder got this year. So you can't say it was a bad season. So I'm going to ask you to grade the Thunder from an overall basis first, and then grade the offense and the defense. So over the whole season, playoffs included, what grade would you give the Thunder on an overall basis?
I mean, I still got to give him an A. I can't give him an A plus because they're not in the NBA Finals. But when you look at the context of this season, they had the best record in the NBA. They won 64 games, and they did that despite being one of the most injured teams in the league this season. And it wasn't just injuries to, into the roster guys, although those guys missed a lot of time too. And who knows how much Thomas Sorber, for instance, could have helped this season in some games. But it was to top guys. Obviously, J-Dub stands out, but I mean, everybody missed double-digit games. Alex Caruso, Isaiah Hartenstein, Chet, Lou Dort, Shea, AJ Mitchell, obviously. Like, go down the list. Everybody missed double-digit games. Jay will. And they still ended up with 64 wins, the number one seed, so much so that they could rest their guys in the last couple of games because they had it clinched early. And this was in a stacked West. And they did make it to the final moments of a Game 7 in the Western Conference Finals without J-Dub, your second best player, and without A.J. Mitchell, who I argued going into the playoffs was the Thunder's fourth best player. I thought that going into the playoffs before he got hurt. So to me, this was like your second and fourth best players, and so much shot creation and playmaking and like the ripple down effects that it has not having those two guys on the court and what does to everybody else's role and puts them in positions they're not normally playing and how it shifts the Spurs defense to tilt towards just one person. It just makes everything else difficult. So when I look at the context of the regular season, what they accomplished, an MVP, a new all-star and all-NBA player, and Chet, guys stepping up all season like Casey Wallace, I think that it was an A season. And the only reason it's not an A+ is because they were 6 points away from going to overtime in a Game 7 to go to the NBA Finals. I know it was 8 points, but I'm not counting that Devin Vassell dunk at the end. It was a 2-possession game when it mattered. So it's an A season for me.
All right, let's get your grade on the offense overall this season. And I think there's going to be extra scrutiny on the offense and the Thunder's offensive system. Again, no J-Dub, no AJ, which affects the outcome here in the series. But, against the Spurs, the Thunder, in all 4 losses, I think, had really struggled offensively. But take that into account, but also the season as a whole. How would you rate the Thunder as an offense?
Yeah, so this one's tough because if you actually look at the offense in the playoffs, it was honestly really, really good until you got to the Spurs. And it's so hard to gauge. I hate to keep saying J-Dub and AJ Mitchell, but to me, like it has been so overlooked. Like if this series, if it was flipped and the Thunder were completely healthy and the Spurs were without Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper, for instance, for the majority of these games, for 5 of these games, like I think it looks completely different. But the Thunder's playoff offensive rating was second in the NBA only to the New York Knicks. Obviously, 2 of those series were against the Phoenix Suns and the Los Angeles Lakers. But when you consider, again, that J-Dub missed those series and we saw these teams doubling, tripling, quadrupling Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and we saw, how the role players stepped up and hit threes and Shea still excelled and all those things. When I look at the fact that they were second in the NBA in offensive rating in the playoffs, even, taking into consideration that Spurs series, and then in the regular season, they were 7th in offensive rating, despite all their injuries throughout the season. Could they have been better? Yes. And you got to, despite any sort of injury excuse, you got to dock them some for the Spurs series for sure. But I'd still say like an A-. I mean, number 2 in offensive rating in the playoffs, number 7 in offensive rating in the regular season, and 64 wins. And you had to have offense to win games, and they had plenty. So to me, it's still just like an A-.
All right, let's switch to the defense. I think coming into the season, the expectations were that the Thunder would have the best defense in the league, although the Spurs were coming for them on that. How would you grade the Thunder from a defensive standpoint this year?
I mean, in the regular season, they were the best defense in the league. They were dominant again on that side of the ball. Not as much as they were last year. There was, I felt, a fall off. They still led the league in defensive rating at 106.5 in the regular season. They were better than the Pistons. They were better than the Spurs in the regular season, again, despite injuries. In the playoffs, that fell all the way to number 6 out of 16 teams. And, it was apparent that their defense wasn't as good in the playoffs as we're used to seeing. It wasn't as dominant. Still a lot of turnovers forced in the regular season and the playoffs, but still not to the point that we're used to seeing with this dominant Thunder defense. And I think that was one of the, ultimately in the Spurs series, it was the offense that cost them, not the defense. So it's kind of funny because I felt like the defense against the Spurs was actually pretty good. and it was the offense that faltered. And in the prior series, I thought the defense was really good against the Suns and the Lakers for the most part. I guess an A minus. I mean, it's hard to they fell off in the playoffs, but they were still really good. They were dominant in the regular season, but not as good as last year. So I'll say A minus. That feels fair.
Yeah, that feels fair. I agree with your grades. I mean, the Thunder had a successful season, and I know that the sour taste in everybody's mouth is because they lost Game 7, but 164 games. They were on the brink of returning to the NBA Finals and having a chance for back-to-back titles. They SGA won MVP. Chet was first team all defense, and he made an all NBA team. Casey Wallace first team, or was not first team, but Casey Wallace was all defense. Shea all NBA. I mean, they had a really good season by all measures, offensively, defensively, and A variations of A's all around make sense to me. So I guess we'll make this fun, or maybe this is going to be uncomfortable, but I'm going to give you 10 different overreaction takes after Game 7, and you got to blindly rank them from 1 to 10, 1 being the one you agree with the most, to 10 being the one you agree with the least. So you don't know what's coming. We'll see how you do. You ready?
I am ready.
All right. First one, and this is the one that we got to kick off with because that seems to be 90% of the online discourse has been about Chet. So I'm going to phrase the first take this way. Chet is overrated and he's not a max player.
Okay, I completely disagree with that. But I feel like there's going to be much worse than that because I've seen some of the takes and they go pretty far. So I will put that in the middle. I feel like that's a safe middle one. I'll put that at 6.
Number
He's not
6.
overrated.
Okay.
He's not overrated. He was the third best player clearly on a championship team at 23 years old. The Thunder do not win a championship without Chet. He dominated some of those games in that run last year, and he was coming off of a broken hip at 23. He was second in the NBA in Defensive Player of the Year voting, and it wasn't close. Like, as clear as Wemby was number 1, that's how clear Chet was at number 2, and deservedly so. If you look at all his numbers, his metrics, all those things, it says that Chet was a top 2 defender in the world this season. He earned all NBA. With the absence of J-Dub, he stepped up and was the Thunder's second best player all season long. He's a guy that shoots 37% from 3 at 7'1", spaces the floor, hyper efficient offensive player. Won Game 7 against his worst matchup. Obviously, very disappointing game, but he's had 8 other playoff series where he was an elite two-way player and has won a championship. He has the second best regular season winning percentage in NBA history, second only to Cason Wallace, I believe. Those stats may have changed. I haven't looked in the last couple of months. That may have changed, but he's up there. So, no, he is not overrated, and he is a max player, and the Thunder do not win a championship without Chet, and they're not in the final moments of a Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals without Chet.
And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say every one of these takes you're going to disagree with. So we can just give that as the overarching comment to all of these takes. Brandon strong disagrees with all of these, even if it's the one he agrees with the most. All right, number 2, Isaiah Joe has proven that he is not useful in the playoffs.
Okay, I'm not going to talk as much as I did about Chet. I just felt like I had to say something about Chet because that's by far the biggest take out there, and I wanted to get my pushback on record. Isaiah Joe, I think, can be effective in the playoffs. It's just the Thunder had somebody else in Jared McCain who can do a little bit more offensively with ball creation. I think he can be effective in certain matchups, but certainly in a 2 playoff run sample size on a loaded team, he hasn't gotten very many minutes. So I would put that at like 8 because I disagree with it, but it's not as strong as my other disagreements will be.
Well, to be clear, the one that you disagree with, okay, yes, got it. I'm going to edit that out because I sound like an idiot because I was the one confused there for a second. Or maybe I'll leave it in and people can laugh at me. I don't know. We'll see. I'm the editor of this podcast too. All right, number 3. After this series, Wemby has taken the mantle as the undisputed number one player in the league.
Um, I'll put that at 5. I disagree with it, but I disagree with it, but I see the argument. He still hasn't won a title. He still has to do that. And I think the Spurs are really, really good besides just Wemby. And that's where I get kind of hung up. And Shea was better than him in a game 7. And, half those games, Shea was better than him. Overall, Wemby had the better series. But overall, the Spurs tilted their entire defense towards stopping Shea. So Shea's job was much more difficult than Wemby was. I need to see it, for longer stretches. I don't think that you can just take the claim based on, one playoff series. And Shea was clearly better than Wemby this regular season. So I get the argument, but I disagree with it. 5.
All right. The next one. Lou Dort should not have started in this series, and him starting cost OKC.
I'll say 9. I do disagree with it. I still have 9 open, didn't I?
Yeah, you have 9 open. You've done 6, 8, and 5 so far. Yeah.
Okay. I disagree with it, but I see the argument. I think for the continuity, look, Lou Dort has been a starter pretty much every single year since his sophomore season and every single game. And I think just for the continuity and for, what he means and leadership and all those things. But I do get the argument that just based on results in this series, it maybe should have been Kaysen or Caruso or whoever else you wanted to put in there, McCain, whatever. So I see the argument.
All right. The next one. The Thunder should consider trading J-Dub to sell high and generate more future assets.
I know I have 10 left. I've done 9 and 8, right?
Yes, that's right.
I feel like there's going to be a worse take than this, but I can't put this one above some other ones, so I'm going to have to go 10. Trading J-Dub or Chet is not the move. That is not the move. The whole reason the Thunder are not in the NBA Finals right now is because they don't have J-Dub. If they have J-Dub, they're probably in the NBA Finals. You want guys like that. You actually want your second best player who just turned 25 years old, who is the second best player in a championship run that scored 40 points in an NBA Finals game. That is a jack of all trades, do it all, Swiss Army knife, elite defensively, guards 1 through 5, hyper efficient scorer, can score 20 points per game. Look, obviously injury riddled season, and it's a huge bummer, but he's going to have a whole summer to rest now and get his hamstrings right for next season. It is not the move. No.
Okay, so for this next one, I just want to remind you, you've got 1 through 4 open and then 7 open. You've done 5, 6, 8, 9, and 10. And for this next take, it is the Spurs have a brighter future than the Thunder.
Okay, so I do disagree with it, but consider I'm going to disagree with all of these. This is a rational take, at least. I can see the argument because they are younger when you look at their core than the Thunder is. They also have some assets, and they do have Wemby, who is just 22 years old. So I'll go with 1. I do think the Thunder have a brighter future because I still think that right now they are the better team but the Spurs are in the finals right now, and they could very well win a final. So, it'll be 1-1 in championships possibly very soon. The Thunder have Presti. The Thunder have a ton of assets and draft picks, more than the Spurs. And I do like, the surrounding core around the Thunder and some of the upside that we'll see with AJ Mitchell and Kaysen Wallace and even, maybe some of these draft picks. And I trust Presti's salary cap management, and the Spurs are going to have to pay their players at some point and lose some players. But I see the argument considering the age and where the Spurs already are. So I'll say 1 on that one.
All right, next one. This series proved Wemby should have been MVP over Shea.
Oh, gosh. What's my lowest one left? 7?
7's the lowest one left, yes.
Yeah, 7. You cannot look at a playoff series. And by the way, again, a playoff series in which the other MVP was missing his second best player and his next best teammate and his third best next teammate, and say this is why this person should have won the regular season MVP award. Please go back and look at the regular season numbers. And the Thunder won more games. Shea's numbers far outpaced Wemby's numbers. Wemby, you can't ignore the defense, obviously. Dominant defensively. Also, look at minutes played. Also, look at like records with and without those players playing for those teams. Shea clearly deserved MVP over Wemby. Now, next season, going into next season, that could be a different, things change. But no, this is a regular season award, and Shea was much better in the regular. I shouldn't say much better, but he was better in the regular season.
All right, we've got 2, 3, and 4 left. The next one, Oklahoma City desperately needs a Wemby stopper, and so its off-season priority should be looking to make front court trades or should aggressively pursue Giannis.
I'll say 4 because it's my lowest one left, because I disagree with the Giannis take, because you're going to have to give up either J-Dub or Chet to do that, and the Thunder absolutely should not give up a dude who just turned 24 or a dude who just turned 25 who's all NBA, all defense, for someone, 7-8 years older and gut like any sort of like assets, depth, and all those things, and also who's used to being the number one guy and a superstar, and you don't know how that fit's going to be. And by the way, he doesn't shoot threes, so you're going to have some spacing issues. You got to make sure you have 4 other shooters around him when you're playing the Spurs. Obviously, Giannis on this team would be awesome and fun, and they would be dominant. The window shortens significantly if you get Giannis. And then the whole front court thing, I understand that, but I look, Wemby's offense was not the issue against the Spurs. Wemby's defense was an issue against the Spurs, absolutely. But Wemby's offense, besides game 1, when they put, J-Dub on him, a wing, where he scored 41 points, and it was all at the rim besides that 35-foot three-pointer at the end. It was all at the rim. Once they put a center on him, once they guarded him with either Hartenstein or J. Will or Chet, Wemby's offense was not really an issue. It really wasn't. So I don't think that you necessarily need a Wemby stopper. Hartenstein did a good enough job. J. Will did a solid job. You got Chet, who should get stronger. And you got Thomas Sorber, by the way, who is 6'10", but he's got a crazy wingspan. He's got like a 7'6" wingspan. Very physical. He actually, if you put in a lab like measurements and strength and all those things, who could at least slow down Wemby? Ideally, it could be a guy like Thomas Sorber. They got the number 12 pick, and you might get a Yaxel or Morez Johnson Jr. who could do a solid job against Wemby. So, no, I disagree.
All right, you've got 2 and 3 left. So these are 2 of the takes you agree with the most. All right, next to last one. This series was a win for ethical basketball and an indictment against foul baiting and flopping.
I wish I still had number 10 left. This sucks. Because I'm going to give this like a 2 or 3. I did not manage my lower one well enough at all. Dang it. All right. Well, obviously I'm giving this a 3 because it's my lowest one yet. This take is out there and is so disingenuous. It is so false. If you actually watch this series and you watch like Wemby and Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper, great players, all the credit to the Spurs and all those things. But if you're talking about flopping, if you're talking about selling foul calls, if you're talking about like one team getting away with physicality and fouling on one end, but getting the whistle on the other end, the Spurs far outpaced the Thunder in free throws this series. They had a significant free throw advantage in the series, first of all. And if you look at like, the antics and selling fouls and all that stuff, they did it just as much as the Thunder did. They just don't go viral because the clips and the posts and the tweets don't get the engagement and clicks and views if it's not the Thunder, because the Thunder were the villain and the Spurs were somehow the good guys. It's so disingenuous. Completely disagree. I wish I had a 10 left to give this.
All right. Well, I don't know if you're going to like number 10 either. So the last one that is going to fall in at number 2, the take you agree with the second most, is The Thunder dynasty is over.
Oh gosh, I screwed this up big time.
I saw that on Reddit. Many people RIP Thunder Dynasty 2025, 2026.
I even said in the beginning of this, I know there's going to be some takes that I like completely disagree with that are going to be terrible. And I still gave away too many of my lower end ones. I messed this up. The Thunder dynasty is not over. The Thunder were a handful of points away from going back to the NBA finals without their second and fourth best players. They are still incredibly young. If they were to win the finals this year, they still would have been one of the youngest teams of all time to win the finals. They have a two-time MVP who just started his prime, locked up for the next half decade. They have two other All-NBA players who just turned 24 and 25, locked up for the next half decade. They got AJ Mitchell on a still of a deal for the next couple years. They'll do whatever they can to keep him. They've got Cason Wallace, who's extension eligible. You've got all these young players, draft picks. You got a Jared McCain on a rookie deal. You've got Mark Daigneault, one of the best coaches in the NBA. You could argue the best coach in the NBA, certainly top three. You got Sam Presti with a treasure chest of draft picks. You've got a team that's been the number one seed in the West 3 straight years, the number one overall seed 2 straight years. They won a championship. They were on the brink of going to the NBA Finals again. They are not going anywhere. The dynasty is not over. We've seen with the Spurs, their dynasty, they didn't win like a bunch back to back. They like won one, off a year, won another one, off a few years, won another one. Same thing with the Warriors. Yeah, they had a back-to-back deal, but they won one, off a year, won again. Like in the NBA, you don't necessarily, your dynasty doesn't have to be like repeating or three-peating. It can be winning 3 over, 6 or 7 years. And that is certainly in play for the Thunder. I think that the Thunder and the Spurs are going to be the 2 best teams over the next half decade, and they certainly could win another one, if not more.
I agree with all of that. I am sorry that that's the take you agree with the second most, but
Yeah.
hey, that's the way you ranked them. I don't know what to tell you about that. But to put a button on that, it's easy to overreact after the disappointment of losing Game 7. It was painful to watch, especially the way that it happened. But when you take an objective view of things, the Thunder are going to be incredibly good next year. And if I am the Spurs, if I am the Nuggets, if I am the Lakers, if I'm any other team in the NBA, the Thunder are still a problem. They're a major problem, and they're going to win 60, 65 games next season, assuming good health. And so I don't, not going to overreact and think that it's all over and now it's time to tank again because we're going to have 10 straight years of Wemby dominance. The Thunder are a threat next year, and that's just objectively true.
100%, 100%. And in the NBA, look, things didn't fall the Thunder's way this year. You had to have, you obviously had to be talented and be one of the best teams in the NBA to win a championship. You also had to have some luck. There's no way around it. Look at NBA history, and you had to have, health. And that did not go the Thunder's way this season. Who's to say going forward what's going to happen with any team as far as like injury luck on the other end? Like, look at the Spurs this year. They played an Wolves team where Ant either didn't play or he was compromised. He wasn't at 100%. They didn't have Dante DiVincenzo. I think Io was out a game or two, or at least he was hurt. Like, they had some injury luck against the Wolves. They obviously had injury luck against the Thunder. Mitchell Robinson is going to play in the finals, and he's probably their best chance to slow down Wemby. But he's got a broken pinky. He's probably going to play, but he's got a broken pinky. Like, things have fallen the Spurs' way this year. And some of that you can say, hey, some of those things fell the Thunder's way last year. You got to have health. You got to have some luck. And you can't just say like, oh, the Spurs have now passed the Thunder. I think these are the 2 best teams in the NBA. If you want to say the Spurs are the best team and Thunder number 2, or Thunder number 1 and the Spurs are number 2, that's fine. But there's no way to say like even matchups in playoffs. Like, what if the Spurs had to face Jokic in the playoffs next year, and Jokic just has one of those series where he's unstoppable, or his guys are healthy and Aaron Gordon goes off? We saw last year he hits a game winner or 2. Like, who knows what's going to happen going forward? But it doesn't just mean like, Spurs have now passed the Thunder. That equals Spurs are winning the next 5 championships and the Thunder are done. It just does not work that way. And I think that we're going to see this is the beginning of the NBA's best rivalry. And I think these two teams are going to be exchanging blows for the next several seasons. And maybe they'll, trade off winning championships. Maybe, we don't know what's going to happen. But I do think that there's a lot of overreactions. And I understand the disappointment, but that's just the nature of the NBA and sports. Sometimes just things don't go your way, even if you are the best team in that particular season.
And I was going to add what you just said, that this is the start of, I think, the next great NBA rivalry. The ratings for the series were incredible. I think Game 7 was the most watched finals or conference finals game in a quarter of a century. This is something people are going to watch, is going to be engaged with, and having the Thunder go toe-to-toe against the Spurs in the regular season and next year in the playoffs is something everybody wants to see. And so we're going to get some more of it. It's not over. But to recap the top 10 overreaction takes from 1 to 10, from what you agree with the most to the least, the one you agree with the most is that the Spurs have a brighter future than Oklahoma City, followed by the Thunder dynasty is over. Then that the series was a win for ethical basketball and an indictment against foul baiting and flopping at number 3. Next, the Thunder need a Wemby stopper, and that should be their offseason focus. Number 5, that Wemby has taken the mantle as the best player in the league. Number 6, Chet is not a max player, and he's overrated. And then at number 7, the series proved that Wemby should have been MVP over Shea. Number 8, Isaiah Joe has proven he is not useful in the playoffs. Number 9, Lou Dort should not have started, and him starting cost OKC the series. And at number 10, the Thunder should consider trading Jalen Williams so they can gain some more assets.
Oh, I screwed that up. Do me a favor and don't publish that out of context anywhere in print because that is a horrible list. I totally mismanaged that. I would like to I was mentally exchanging the Isaiah Joe with the foul baiting, or the Thunder dynasty is over, and the Lou Dort take should have been higher. And I totally mismanaged that.
I know your 1, 2, 3 looks pretty rough because number 1 again is the Spurs have a brighter future. The Thunder dynasty is over, followed by that was a win for ethical basketball. Whew.
Yeah,
that's a tough top 3. You sound like a Spurs fan.
Yeah, do not tweet that out. I will get roasted, and everyone will be like, "Oh, Brandon thinks that the Thunder dynasty is over, and that was a win for ethical basketball." Oof.
Well, I'm going to give you one last opportunity to cover any hot takes or overreactions that you've heard that weren't on this list that you want to push back on.
I mean, I know I've seen some, and they're just not coming to mind right now. But by far, my biggest thing with all of it, from what I'm seeing the most, that I think is the most absurd, is the whole trading Chet or trading J-Dub thing. You've locked in a big 3 that has won a championship. They weren't healthy this year. That sucks. But this is a championship core, and you don't trade away those guys. The fit, honestly, and this postseason doesn't change anything. The fit is seamless between these 3 guys. It is the perfect fit. You don't trade those guys. So I've seen it so everywhere, and that's my biggest pushback. You don't trade Chet or J-Dub. These guys are still essential to the Thunder winning going forward.
Well, to close us out, we will talk briefly about the finals. Mainly, I'm going to get your predictions. And now that I know that you're a big Spurs fan, I'm going to assume you're going to predict that the Spurs are going to win the finals. But 2 questions. 1, who do you predict is going to win the finals and in how many games? And who do you want to win the finals?
I'll predict that the Spurs win I'll say the Spurs win in 6 games. And who do I want to win? Absolutely the Knicks. The discourse is going to be insufferable if this Spurs team wins at this stage in Wemby's and Castle's and Harper's careers. Just insufferable from the amount of, as the kids would say, glazing that's going to be happening. And look, again, all due credit, they are a great team, insanely talented, top to bottom. But after having gone through a whole series where I just felt like so many takes both ways were disingenuous, and some things were said about the Thunder that I felt were not true, and it was used to kind of prop up this team already, like before they've won anything. The amount of glazing is going to be pretty high, and so I'm rooting for the Knicks.
Yeah, I'm gonna predict the Spurs win in 5. The Knicks have played really well, especially defensively, but I do think the Spurs created a matchup issue that the Knicks just haven't had experience facing this season, especially in the context of the playoffs. And so I think the Spurs are just that good. Maybe I'm the Spurs fan here, but I'm kind of with you. I'm rooting for the Knicks. I think it'd be exciting to see the legacy team like the Knicks win an NBA title, to overcome the odds, to beat the upstart Spurs. That'll be a great story. But I'll spin it the other way too. If the Spurs do manage to win a title with them being so young, sign me up for a Spurs Thunder Western Conference Finals next season, because I would love for the Thunder to eliminate them and end their reign as champions next year.
Yeah, it would be and that would be like the ultimate in setting up this rivalry, like that the Spurs knock off the Thunder after their championship, and then the Thunder knock off the Spurs after their championship. That would be like the ultimate, bird magic type of thing, where you're just like heavyweights, like exchanging punches back and forth.
So that would be the silver lining to the Spurs winning. You have that opportunity. So either way, I'll be excited for next season for whatever the Thunder are going to do and how good they're going to be. Oh, well, we'll get into more off-season talk, what the Thunder might do with their roster. They do have some tough decisions up ahead. They do have pretty significant tax bill potentially with the financial commitments that they have made or will need to make to retain this core. But that's for a later time, and that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning in to the Daily Thunder podcast. I'm John Napier, host of the podcast, and he's Brandon Rahbar, Daily Thunder beat writer. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe to the Daily Thunder podcast on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you like what you hear, do us a favor and leave us a rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll be back in your feed soon.